Good morning. So it is 9:30 and we are going to get started with our Pulse and Soybean morning here at Ag Days. So my name is Wendy McDonald and I am the production agronomist for Western Manitoba for the Pulse and Soybean growers. I live at Gilbert Plains and I've been an agronomist for over 25 years and I'm very excited to be your MC for the morning, and then I also get to ask the hard questions to our on-farm network panel of farmers a little later. So a few things you may have noticed scrolling by on the screen, just a few different announcements, so we'll talk about those as we go. But one thing we wanted to mention before we got started was we want everyone to help themselves to some of the cookies on the table up top. And those cookies are a little bit special in that they are made with navy beans. We were able to get the Food Development Center at Portage la Prairie to make these cookies for us. So there are two flavors. There's chocolate chip and snickerdoodle. They are actually not gluten-free. They do have flour as another ingredient there, but they're individually packaged, so feel free to enjoy some during the presentations and take some home for your family and friends later too. Speaking of things that we'd love for you to take home with you today, we've got some notebooks that you can take up there. We've got our latest edition of Pulse Speed magazine. We have the Pulse and Soybean Variety Guide, so that's a great one to look through when you're trying to pick which varieties for next year. That's also up there, so yeah, be sure to check out the table up top for anything you'd like to take with you. Anyone that's collecting CEU credits, just remember to sign your name or scan the code up top for the presentations this morning. And we're very lucky to have 3 presentations, and we're going to get started with the first one over here. So I am very proud to introduce my colleague. So our first presenter, Terry Buss. Terry is the production agronomist for Eastern Manitoba for Manitoba Pulse and Soybean growers, and Terry brings a wealth of knowledge to this role. So Terry has been an agronomist for over 3 decades. He spent some time in Alberta working for the Alberta government out there. He worked for 23 years for the Manitoba government in their Beausejour office, and so he retired. He retired for a grand total of 10 days and then came to work for Manitoba Pulse and Soybean growers. So Terry grew up on a farm north of Beausejour, and as the way the world turns, Terry is now currently building a new house on that home family farm at Beausejour, has a couple of daughters, and one of them getting married this summer. So with that, I'd like to bring on over my friend and colleague, Terry Buss.
Thanks very much, Wendy. I appreciate you doing that. We'll just bring up the slides here. So, good morning to all of you. I thank all of you for coming to this presentation. I really appreciate it. I'm going to move around a fair bit, just so you know. So my presentation, it's gone through several titles, but the one we finally settled on was Don't Just Accept the Data, Challenge It. And this is about, I think, something that I'm really passionate about. In fact, I don't know, 12 or 14 years ago, I was in this room, I think, probably was this room, talking about the same topic. I think it's really important that growers develop the skills they need to assess the validity of the research or research looking like stuff that they're presented so they can make good decisions. So we'll just start exploring that a bit. So a little bit about me so you can understand my perspective a bit. Some of this you heard already. I've got my bachelor's degree and a master's degree. And I did my work in plant growth promoting rhizobacteria, or plant growth stimulators. So I have a bit of expertise in that. I spent a lot of time working on a potential product that turned out to be a failure, but it was a very educational thing that stuck with me. I've got a BA in psychology. I save a fortune on therapy, which is handy, but I have found that a lot about my business is how people think and how people perceive things and how people behave. Science is part of it, but science isn't all of it. So my career is really adult education. I'm an agronomist, but I've always been somebody who's been trying to work myself out of a job, get my clients to acquire the skills so that I can move on to new ground and they can be competent in what they need to be competent in. So that's really what I do. 33 years in provincial government service. I retired for 10 days. When you retire, don't build a new house. All of a sudden you're financially insecure again. And so then I went back to work for the Manitoba pulse and soybean growers, and it's been just a hoot. I'm loving working for these folks. I'm really impressed by the organization. Grower concerns and grower comprehension of things they need to know, skills they need to have, drive me every day. That's what I'm about. Like I said, I'm about working myself out of a job because there's always a new job for me to do. So goals for this presentation, I want to turn you into a bit of a science geek. If you're not already, not full geek like me, but a little geeky. I think it's important that we all have these skills. And it's not hard to get the basic skills that everyone needs. This isn't rocket science, as it were. I want to raise your level of dissatisfaction. I hope you come out of this irritated so that you're not happy with some of the stuff that you're presented by people in your industry, or at least you've got some probing questions for folks. I want that to happen. I hope I make you a little uncomfortable, and maybe we can start a movement. I can be the leader, we can have uniforms, whatever, but I'd like to see us, nobody cares what I think, right? Like when I go and say, I don't think that's good science, what you're talking about there, nobody gives a damn, because I haven't bought a bag of fertilizer in 27 years. But the growers are buying the fertilizer. You're the guys that need to push back if you're not satisfied with the information you're being presented. But you need to know what you're talking about, and you're all intelligent people. I'm just going to guide you maybe a little on some of the things that I've learned. What this presentation is not, there's the big police badge. I'm not the cop. There is no cop in a lot of things in this industry. I'm not a regulator. I'm not going to tell you which products are good and which products are bad and which companies are good and who's the villain. I'm hoping that you determine whose information you value and whose information you do not value. So this isn't going to be a litany of who the bad guys are. I'm not an activist. Why should you care? Money, money, money. Bad decisions cost money. And remember, if you're using a product or using a practice on your farm that only works once every 10 years, it better darn well work wonderful that 1 year because it's going to make up for the other 9. We tend to forget this. If something costs you $5 an acre and it works 1 every 10 years, on the year it works, it's got to give you your $5 an acre back, but it's also got to give you $45 back, and then it's got to make you money because it hadn't made you any money, and then there's the cost of time and money and inflation, la-da-da. So money is the big one, but it's not just money. As I said, this notice came out in 2013 for things like fertilizer supplements, fertilizer products, plant growth supplements. The gloves are off. There is no regulation of efficacy since 2013. The only regulation was that the product not kill you when you use it. Otherwise, there's nothing. No efficacy testing. You don't even have to have what you say is in the bag. So that means that it's up to the grower to know the questions to ask and to be able to assess what they're being told, which is fine. This was done to unleash innovation. That was the reason, to get innovators to come to this country and deliver their products. But it also means that the business has exploded. I got this from Ashley Amateur from Manitoba Crop Alliance, an organization very similar to ours, working on other crops, and she got this from another source. These are all the companies in plant growth stimulants and other such products in the North American market. Look at all of those trademarks and all of those types of products. It is a sea. Since 2013, this business has just exploded, okay? So how do we swim in this ocean? And, during the Vietnam War, the kids used to yell, "The whole world is watching, the whole world is watching." Well, the whole world is watching agriculture and its practices. That's what's going on. So the whole world is watching. This is a current issue, but there's been past ones. Health Canada might take away over-the-top dicamba in soybeans. We don't work in a vacuum. The world cares about what we're doing and the products we're using. People are very concerned about the environment, their health, and other things. So we have to make sure that we're making good decisions, judicious decisions about what we use. I've got a cold, folks, so I'm going to have some problems with my throat. But the whole world is watching. We have to be good stewards. We have to be able to assess the things we're being told and make sure we make good decisions that are profitable but also appropriate. Just on that dicamba issue, if you have an opinion,
you can get involved. The comment period for the public to comment on the proposed dicamba ruling closes on January 30th. This is the page that you go to post a comment if you want to comment on the issue. The incredible web address is below. I don't know why the feds make these kind of web addresses. It's gigantic. The link, it's just gigantic. But if you want it, I can give it to you later. And remember this was 2014, neonicotide seed treatments on soybeans. That's another controversy that the industry weathered. And again, it was an argument about science and judicious use and appropriate use of products based on good science. So we as growers have to be able to look at science with the right skills and tools. It's just good for our industry. But before we look at the science, I've got a degree in psychology, so this is going to get very schmoozy, very touchy. We have to look inward first. We have to understand the way we act, because that's part of it. I have found in my career I have to understand how human beings function in order to be useful to them. I can't just spout science at people. I think this is a mistake that we're making. Perception versus reality. When it comes to our businesses, we all think we're Spock. Logical, always based on science and data. Truth is, a lot of us are Jim Kirk. You know Jim? Spock, where are my aliens? You know, very dramatic, always falling in love with the leading lady, always stomping around and shouting. We're very emotional creatures, all of us. We're moved by our emotions. We're not as stoic and as stoic as we make ourselves out to be, but we have to kind of check our egos, and I'm number one in this. I've got ego for everybody, to realize that I'm just not this incredibly logical, reasonable person. My wife's in the crowd. Ask her if you get a chance. We also, as an industry, sometimes believe in the silver bullet. You remember Mighty Mouse? I'm pretty old, so, you know, here I come to save the day. I say that every time I open a pickle jar for my wife. It annoys the crap out of her. But we believe in the silver bullet sometimes too much in the industry. Oh, well, I've got herbicide tolerance, another mode of action will come along. Or whatever the issue is. Mighty Mouse will show up with a jug of something under his arm, and I'll spray that and my problems will go away. But we're finding that's not the case. An understanding of science can help us negotiate those issues much better and much more effectively. Human beings like to deny complexity. I'm like this, keep it simple, stupid. But sometimes it's not simple, stupid. That's the problem, right? So we believe life exists on a 45-degree line. If you move A, then B follows naturally and exactly where you think it's going to go. Nothing works that way. And I'm amazed sometimes that I fall into this pattern of thinking, because our factory is not in a building. Our factory is outside. Biology is our factory. There's nothing more unpredictable than biology. And yet, the industry sometimes slips into this in individuals where it's like, well, it's just simple, everything's straightforward. The simplest answer is always the best one. So we have to check ourselves on that. Defensiveness. Sometimes we get caught in this too, where all the creatures are against me. I'm the thin blue line. I must take action. I must act. There's no time to think. There's no time to count bugs. There's no time to use thresholds. I've got to spray something. I've got to do something. I've got to cultivate. I've got to feel better because I'm moving. And sometimes that's the wrong move. So we really have a bias for action, and we can get defensive. I can get very negative. I'm always fighting the next bug, and that can make me trigger happy. Decision making is stressful. It's a stressful part of our business. The numbers, the bets are so big now. The numbers are so high. We must recognize that making decisions is stressful, and that we have to pace our way through that. And we have to be sensitive to the fact that it puts a big load on us. This is Betty Crocker cake. Have you guys ever heard the phrase, Betty Crocker farmers? My organic friends like to throw that one at me. Or you're a Betty Crocker farmer, you just follow the directions on the box. You know? Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not anti-Betty Crocker, okay? You want to make cake out of a box, these people are fantastic. But sometimes we weary of the decisions, and we'd like to have a day when we just got to follow the directions on the box, right? But that's not how this business works if you're going to make money and be sustainable. So I think I get really offended when this gets thrown at me. I don't believe any of my clients just follow the instructions on the box. But my point is, decision making the calls, for me, is the hardest part of this business. Absolutely hate it. I miss Dad. He used to do this part. Unsubstantiated leaps of logic. This is another thing human beings do. We like to do experiments in our brain, but they're ridiculous. So if I can cook a stuffed turkey at 350 in 5 hours, then I can cook it in 1 hour at 1400. That's just ridiculous. But we as human beings sometimes think that we can just make these iterations in our brain without doing the science, and they make sense. I see this with herbicide rates and insecticide rates and insecticide thresholds all the time, where people just start quartering things and having things, and I'm like, where's the research on this? Well, no, it just makes sense. Well, yeah, you just burnt your turkey, buddy. Here's one that I actually experienced. I was standing next to the agronomist 20 years ago when he said this to the crowd at a presentation. We haven't found the product to be very effective, so we recommend you using the half rate. If you're going to do something wrong, make sure you do it economically. Don't spend too much on your bad decisions. I don't even know how to justify this one. And the thing is, he wasn't a bad guy. The guy wasn't some sort of thief. It's just that it was so ingrained in him that we have to take action, because he had a bias for action, that he had to put some fungicide in that herbicide and make it in a pass. He just got to. And it's not working, so we just got to spend less on it, but we got to do it. He was caught up in his own psychological trap without even realizing what he was doing. Social pressure and contagion. Who's seen this guy? Billy Bob from Club Root Acres. Now, I'll caution you, if you don't know Billy Bob, he's on YouTube. When you Google Billy Bob, language warning. Billy Bob drops a lot of F-bombs. Now, I'm used to it, but for those of you who are higher born than me, come from better people, you may be offended. And he does a bit about buying a new pump for his Liberty at the end of the thing that you probably should just not watch. It's a little bit rude. But to me, this guy is a philosopher. He's got this skit called Neighbors, and he talks about the social pressure and contagion in farming. We don't farm in an isolated building. We farm with all of our neighbors around us, right? And it's a wonderful skit. If you've ever farmed with your dad, you can really relate. Like, to me, this guy just totally captures it. You know, he said, he put one part of his little talk, he does these little topics, he calls them. He says, you know, we're all at the coffee shop, and we're all asking each other, well, when are you going to start seeding? And the guys go, nah, you know, she's kind of tacky. We got lots of time. We'll get going in about a week. We'll just get our stuff ready. So you go back to your farm, you start working on your air drill some more, and there goes the neighbor. He's got his drill, he's going somewhere, and there comes the tender right behind him. And so you speed up with your fixing, and then there goes another neighbor. Tender right behind him. They're lying. So then off you go. So then it's a race, and everybody's seeding, and it's wet, and all the air drills are doing the hokey pokey down the field, and it's a big mess, right? Because it's a race to see who gets done first. And that's the kind of social pressure that happens. I have done this too many times. Baling hay, could barely get through the baler, but there's Terry trying to prove a point. And then he talked about spraying, and this is my favorite, because I farmed with my dad. And he said, you do your first pass, all, you know, great action on the weeds. So, you know, we're going to pull out the travel trailer, go fishing for 2 weeks, take the family out, see the kids. And then there goes a sprayer. What is he spraying? We all just finished. And there goes another one. The other neighbor's going. And then here comes Dad. He barely can get out of his pickup truck. He comes flying in the yard. Load up the sprayer. We got to go. We got to go. Oh, Dad, what are we spraying? Everything. Everything. What are we putting on? All of it. Tank mix at one pass. Fungicide and insecticide and herbicide. We don't even know what the target is, right? But there must be something going on because the neighbor's doing it. So now, you know, it depends on your neighbor. I got some neighbors, really good farmers. When I see them doing something, I go over to see what it is because they might know something. And as an agronomist, like some of my neighbors are my cousins, so I'm in their crops all the time. It's quite annoying because they pay me rent, so I'm very involved. They don't want me there. But the point is, this is another pressure on us, and we should recognize the influence this has on our decisions when we start abandoning looking at data and just acting, right? So my point with all this is we got to think about the psychology. We have to be aware of how we behave, not just the science. Be aware of how you behave. It's a big part of who we are. So I still get a lot of calls, I have for decades, but it's growing. I get a lot of calls about products that suggest moderate 10% or less increases in yield for less than $10 an acre. I call it the less than 10 for less than 10, right? That's often the value proposition. And often these products only talk about application timing. They really don't get into when is it the right time for the crop, or how do you optimize its use. Most of the time, just, you use it now. And either they don't provide any research evidence, or they provide evidence from somewhere far away. It's not my agroclimatic zone. Like, I've seen products with evidence from England. Well, those people farm in a greenhouse. Doesn't mean anything to me. Or if they provide research evidence, it lacks the information that you and I need to assess its quality and its accuracy. So the graph is incomplete. I see a lot of this. So we need to learn how to call these situations out and how to explore further. Maybe they just didn't think you wanted to know that, or maybe they just don't have that information. One of the things that really concerns me in some product classes, what I'm finding is groups like mine are feeling that they need to start testing these products because there just isn't any information. But that's taxpayer money and levy. I don't know if that's the best place to spend that. Why isn't the manufacturer doing that? Why isn't the salesperson got that information? Why are we doing it? I can see revalidating what they say, but when in an absence of any data, public institutions and grower groups and stuff like that are starting to do this work. Or, and even more weird, there's no evidence, and so the farmer is the research person, and he's even paying the guy for the input, and then generating the data that that guy's using to sell more of this product. That seems backwards to me. I think the evidence should be there before you buy the product. That's just the way I roll. So that's something that I'm quite concerned about. But like I say, nobody's listening to me. They're listening to the buyer. So 4 important areas I want to cover here. One is the continuum of research. Research happens in agriculture in a specific way for a reason. I want to describe that to you because people are jumping steps. Experimental design, and especially the importance of replication. Splitting a field once doesn't cut it anymore to evaluate a product. I want to talk a little bit about data analysis and how to judge data quality. None of this is hard. You don't have to understand the math. You just have to know the right questions to ask. One of the great things about our industry is a lot of the ideas, a lot of the research inspiration comes from the farmer. Comes from people seeing things as they drive their fields in the sprayer or whatever. So that's one really cool thing about our industry. A lot of the ideas come directly from farmers saying, hey, what about this? Or trying things themselves. Or it comes from agronomists and researchers with relationships with producers, watching what they're doing and observing their environment. So that's good. I just want more involvement for producers. The continuum in research starts on the lab bench in the growth chamber. When we see something, discover something that we think might do something, the way the scientific process works is first we try and take away all the noise in the experiment. We try and isolate and control all the factors so that the only thing that might influence the plant's growth and yield is the thing we're manipulating. And so control things on a lab bench or in a growth chamber. It's very, very quiet in there. We control the light, we control the water, we control the sanitation. It's not like a field at all, but we're just trying to make it as easy as possible for the product or the idea to do something, because we want to see if it even works at this level. We want to explore it and understand it really well. So this is where ideas from the field usually start, And then, if something looks worthy, we take it out to a small plot replicated type of design. There's several different designs. This is a phosphate trial that was done out in Beausejour, where I'm from, with Manitoba pulse growers and with the University of Manitoba being involved. But it's small plots, 2 by 6 meter plots. The whole research area is put on a very uniform, homogeneous piece of land, and you've got 4 replicates. So you've got replication. And we do it this way. For instance, we do our regional variety trials this way, so that the only 2 factors we're hoping are influencing the response that we see between varieties is the weather and the variety. Everything else, soil texture, fertility, all of that, weed control, we've controlled all of that. We've taken it out of the equation so we can see the interaction between the weather and the variety. And so we test a lot of things this way. So now we've taken it from inside the lab to outside, right? But we've taken a small step outside into a less controlled environment. And then we take a bigger step. So this step that we've just taken now is like from Kristen McMillan's program. She's our resident agronomist at the University of Manitoba. So she takes an idea, she does it in her smaller plots, and then ideas there can step out to the field scale research. This is what our MPSG on-farm network does, and you can see Manitoba Crop Alliance and the Manitoba canola growers also have similar efforts. So now we take something that was working in the small plots, and then we take it and we step it out these large field scale trials. Note again the replication. We just don't test each treatment once in that field. We test it multiple times, as many as we can. Replication is power. Replication allows you to be much more confident in the results that you see, and it allows you to talk about that site that you're on, that one isolated site, as well as when you bulk the data together across sites or across years. So replication on any research is absolutely imperative. If you're presented material where there's no replication, it's just a field split in half, or just 1, 2, 3 strips, and people are trying to tell you that they can tell something's happening, be careful. You need at least 3 numbers for an average. So you need 3 replications at a minimum to take an average in order to do statistics. So replication is key. Unfortunately, sometimes this becomes the step. Sometimes ideas go from inspiration to this kind of stuff. This is a situation in a field. These are big, long reps in a field, and there's just 1 treatment each. There's no replication here. Now, this isn't necessarily invalid, but it's quite a weak procedure. It's a weak design, because you can't say anything about results you see at this site in a given year. You can't do any statistics. You can just combine the strips, call it a day. The only thing you can do with sites like this is you can bulk them together across geography, and then run statistics and make a comment about what you saw across a huge geography. So companies will often screen varieties like this, or they'll demonstrate them like this. And then they'll bulk all that data across Western Canada and do statistics on that. That's fine, but you're looking at variety performance across huge geographies. You can't say anything specific about the area where you did each individual test. That's why we avoid doing work like this as much as we can, and we try and do replication at each site, because it gives us so much power. The more replications you have in an experimental design, the more power you have for statistics, and the more confident you are that what you're telling producers about whether something works or not is true. So unfortunately, sometimes, like I say, ideas jump from an inspiration to this with nothing in between and no replication. And now we move into something even bigger. This is the future. And the on-farm program, the on-farm network with MPSG has got our site set up like this. So what happens here is now with variable rate seeding, with good yield monitors that are accurately measuring yield, we can then start making many, many replicates across a whole field. So instead of having 3 reps or 6 reps or 10 reps, treatments are replicated 42 times in this design on this field. This is a very powerful way to do a study, a field scale study. The plots are still large, it's still field scale, but now because of the technology that's getting better and better, we can do a much better job of the research and get a much more powerful result. So this is where the business is going, and I'm excited about that. That's really going to help with getting good information. So when it comes to design, what I want you to pick on is replication. That's a big part of it. We need to see replication on each site. That's important. Replication and good control. So my concerns are replication is required for data analysis. You need 3 numbers to have an average. You need an average to do statistics. Within site replication is needed if you're going to discuss differences at a given site. Proximity to the highway and the driveway are not the parameters through which a research site is chosen. I see a lot of this where plots are in the ditch because it was convenient. You have to pick proper areas of the field to do research. Field scale trials, soil and landscape characterization of each strip is essential. So you have to take a look at the land where you're putting a trial. One treatment can't have a slew in it. And big one, when you're presented research, is the item that they're showing you, is the item that they're showing you a yield increase in something you actually sell? I'm tired of seeing roots that are bigger. I don't sell soybean roots. I sell soybean seeds. So show me more seeds. I see bigger leaves with some things, I see bigger roots, and the theory is, well, the plant is healthier and it's bigger and so it's going to make more yield. Yeah, but show me that it does, right? I don't sell roots. I don't grow carrots. I don't sell roots. But we see a lot of that in the industry. So you can promote the growth of a given plant part, but is it making yield that's going to make money, and does it pay for itself and give you a profit? Statistical analysis. There's nothing for us to fear with this, but everything we look at in terms of research information from various parties should have statistics as part of it. It should be there. And it's easy. Statistical analysis lets us talk about things with a specified level of confidence. So usually we talk about analyzing things at a 95% level of confidence. All that means is when we say that a difference is real, there's only a 1 in 20 chance that we're wrong. Okay? So we're 95% confident. You can determine truth with math. Or if we work at the 90% level of confidence, there's only a 1 in 10 chance that we're lying to you. So 95% confident, I call that really sure. We know this happened. 90% confidence, I say we're pretty sure. Those two levels of confidence are often used in statistical analysis. The 95 is the industry standard, but 90 gets used sometimes. So you should see language like this in the information that you're looking at. When people say there was a difference, you should be able to say, did you analyze that with statistics? Yes. How confident are you? 95%, 90%. They should be able to tell you that. If they can't, then you might just be looking at different numbers and you don't know if they're really different. That's why we do this, to determine what's really different. And as well, in most analyses, they should provide you what's called an LSD, not the drug. For those of you that are old enough to remember those days. LSD is least significant difference. So if data is actually analyzed, because it's actually research, they should be able to tell you whether those differences are real at a certain level of confidence, and they should be able to tell you what the least significant difference is. If you look at any two treatments, how many bushels apart do they have to be for them to be different? That's what it is. It's the measure. So you can go and use that tool to determine which treatments were different from each other. Because not only can we judge truth, we can tell you how big truth is. So here's an example. This is some work done by University of Minnesota by Jody DeYoung-Hughes. So she compared strip till and conventional till in some fields in Minnesota. And her LSD, she did her analysis, P less than 0.10 means 90%. So she did her analysis and she's 90% confident in her results. And the least significant difference is 2.8 bushels. So in 2007 at Prosper, there was a real difference. Conventional till yielded higher than strip till treatments, and it was greater than 2.8 bushels. That is not hard to read. That's pretty straightforward. But now you know what really happened. Now you can see that the differences are kind of all over the place, right? But at least you can tell where the differences are real. There are situations like in Prosper in 2008, that's not different. It's not 2.8 or greater. It's not different at a 90% level of confidence. So we say nothing happened there. That's how science works. So that's not hard to do. That's not hard to read. Everybody should be able to do this. If you guys can figure out some of the wiring on this equipment, you can read this table, right? So that's how it works. Real numeric differences are statistically different. Stats have been run, and the stats tell us that they're actually different in reality. That's how the rules work. They're not just numbers that look different. We've proved they're really different. And then once we have real statistical differences, and you can't imagine how hard it is to keep saying that word statistical when you're Polish. I am struggling. But once we have those differences, we can figure out how frequent they were. Does this thing work once every 10 years, or does it work 9 times out of 10? Nothing ever works every time, right? Except for putting the seed in the ground. Nothing ever works every time, right? Some people congratulate me on how incorrect I am. They tell me they just do the opposite of whatever I do, and they always make the right move. So nothing we do always works. But once we know that differences are real, we can look at frequency, which tells us, is it 7 out of 10? Is it 1 out of 10? We can look at the size range, and then we can do economic analysis. So we can say, is this going to pay and provide me a profit? What's my ROI? But economic analysis requires real differences. So having just talked about what we talked about, what do you think of this? Is that useful information? I see some head nodding no. Yeah, this is crap. This is salesmanship. Salespeopleship, I don't want to be sexist. Salespersonship. But yeah, 0.4. Now see, I used to be a real dummy, so I'd go 0.4 of a bushel, I'm getting 10 bushels, that means I'll make 4 bushels and it cost me 3 bushels, I got a $1 bushel profit. I got 2,000 acres, I got $2,000, phone the dealership, I'm gonna get the extra big tires on my Ford. That's the way my brain worked. But clearly this isn't different. They haven't provided you, there's no stats here. They haven't provided you a level of confidence. They haven't told you that they've done statistics. They haven't provided you an LSD. The graph has no labels on it. Okay, and 0.4 of a bushel, good luck, right? That's not very big. So this is the kind of stuff. Now this is an actual real advertisement. I didn't make this up. I just took all the labels off so the guilty parties will never be found. And it's about 14 years old, so I'm probably safe from a lawsuit. But this doesn't tell us anything. But this kind of information is the stuff that you guys need to push back at and just say to whoever handed it to you, keep this. Put it under your budgie and bring me something good, right? So I was so happy. I was in a meeting. I was at the On-Farm Network meeting. And Jeanette Gaultier, she's got a PhD, but she's a farmer too. And she was hearing some information, and she cried out and started asking questions about statistics. She wasn't satisfied. And I was like, you go, Jeanette. Now, the person she was asking knew the answers, so good on them. But I like to see that moxie, right? That's what we need to do. Now, data quality, my last thing, data quality. Every time statistics are done, you're provided something called a CV, coefficient of variation. You don't need to know much about it. You just need to know that it needs to be there. You get a CV. The higher that percentage, CV is always in percentage, the higher it is, the more crappy the experiment was done, the more error in it, the poorer the job was done. Something's wrong. There are limits to how much noise you have in the experiment. The more poorly the work is done, the less likely you're going to find anything. Right? Shoddy. So, experience dictates acceptable upper CV limits. And also, statistics allows us to examine outliers, because sometimes there is a freaky number or two, and if we can justify it, you can eliminate them. But when we do the RVT trials and we analyze the data, Dennis Lang and group, we look at the CVs. For soybeans, if a trial has a CV that's greater than 15%, we don't use it. That's our measure of quality. We don't go above 15%. Every research piece of information you see where they say they've done real research, they should be able to give you an idea of data quality. It's an essential thing. It's easy. Just ask them the CV, and that's what Jennifer was asking about. Jeanette, she was saying, what's the CV on that? I don't see it. I'd love to see more farmers putting up their hand like that. Here's an example. This is an old corn trial from an old seed Manitoba, 15 years old. But you see down at the bottom, on yield, the first column CV, you might not see it, but it's 8.9%. So the CV is 8.9%. We know this data has quality. Their cutoff is probably about 10 or 15. So it's within quality parameters. We can use it. Then they say there are significant differences, and the least significant difference at a 95% level of confidence, 0.05 means they're 95% confident that anything you find in here is true. They see the LSD is 23 bushels. So those varieties have to be different by 23 bushels or more to actually be different in this experiment. So the 4 bushel difference doesn't mean anything. It's not real in this experiment. So that's not too hard. That's the way we do her. So I encourage you to embrace this stuff and to ask these questions. You as producers, to get some of this stuff, get some of this crappy stuff out of our face so we can see the good stuff. Because there is a lot of good stuff, and we can make some intelligent decisions. Rigas Karamazov said, "In God we trust, all others bring replicated data." Right? He told me he spent the first year of his career examining the new frontiers of soil science and the next 40 years debunking falsehoods. So he knew his business. And thank you for your attention. And I'll just say I wish all of agriculture was as simple, reliable, and easy to fix as my John Deere 3020. But it's not. So I hope that's been helpful. And I look forward to you folks pushing back on bad information. Thank you.